As stated in the previous video, just 2 days after Booster 2, Volume 3 was released on May 27th, 1999. This set is probably the next most important set of the first series, after the first volume and the starter box. The first volume for obviously being, well, the first, and the starter box giving a more competent deck for people to play with, because Volume 3 introduced the first effect monsters into the game, or as they're known in this set, flip monsters. Orange cards that gave an effect upon being flipped face up for the player to use. Now monsters were not just beat sticks, they had effects. They could be used to turn the tide of battle in a key moment. They may not have had the best stats, but they were pretty good. So let us see what the first effect monsters, and one of the most iconic cards, could do for the game in Volume 3. But before we get to the new, this set does reprint a few things from the second booster. Namely, Rogue Doll, so people not near Cardos machines could access the current strongest monster in the game. Don't worry, there's nothing in Volume 3 that beats it out normally. And for the tributes that were available in the set. And don't worry, there's more tributes to come in this one. So first up, we have a certain piece of a forbidden person. His left leg. And it's only his left leg. Hey. There are apparently only one of these in existence until they got it like cheaply printed. You're not grabbing these easily. And this and the other leg, I believe, are the easier pieces to get. Trust me, we're gonna talk about the other pieces at a later point. But right now, it's a weak monster. It exists for a specific combo that would be set up in the coming sets, but right now it's just a leg. So, are you ready for this one? This is Beaver Warrior. Iconic Season 1 monster that Yugi used a couple of times. Slightly adorable, slightly creepy. You want to know what its Japanese name is? Luis. Luis the Beaver Warrior. Yeah. It's one of the few monsters to have an actual name, and we've talked about this before about how some monsters have names, but just like Luis... It's a furry little thing with some okay defense for this point in the series. It also gets a power-up from Sogen, which is mentioned in its card text. And yeah, we can see in this set that's just getting more and more powerful. We're seeing less of these... Okay, no, we've only gotten to 2 monsters, but we're going to see a lot more monsters with over 1,000 in the attack stat or defense stat. And next up, we have our first of many, many Gaias in this game. Gaia, the Dragon Champion, or Knight in the OCG. Yeah, Champion just sounds a bit cooler. A 600 points stronger Curse of Dragons, or 500 points stronger than Gaia on a horse. Yeah, being on the horse is just a slight decrease from being on a dragon. Which, you could argue, okay. This is fine. It is the strongest fusion monster we have at this point, and Curse of Dragons is a good monster for this point, so maybe it's okay, if you didn't have to also play another brick in your hand, and polymerization, that can lose out to any form of removal, so it's kind of just... meh. Next up is the next major power creep for the defenders, i.e. more or less it has 100 more attack points than the Aquamador, so it effectively becomes the best defender by default. Giant Soldier of Storm would be the go-to defender for most of Series 1. Thanks to being a slightly stronger monster, being a common in a set that you could easily get rather than being locked behind the movie theaters or the singles market. And it could, again, work as an attacker and defender, which if you equipped it with certain spells, could work, but it really wasn't worth the deck space to put in those equipped spells, so it was probably better just being a rock ass to prevent you from losing life points, or using its sword to attack for lethal. Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon, the protagonist monster, and the rivals monster that represent them. And now we have the best friend ace monster, the cool and unlimited potential of the Red Eyes Black Dragon. That whole potential thing comes from the first Toei movie, and its flexibility compared to the Blue Eyes mainly just being a large beat stick. The problem is, there's nothing yet for Red Eyes. It's a 2 tribute monster that is inferior to the other 2 tribute monsters you can use at this point. And yes, it's gonna become an archetype. It's a dual monsters card. All of them will become archetypes at this point. But right now, it's just a weaker dragon dex that you would rather use a blue eyes for because it was just stronger and it wasn't a starter deck, so you had it. We're grouping the next 3 monsters up together because they sort of do the same thing, and they're also our first 3 flip monsters. Each card does the same thing of destroying a specific card type. Man-Eater Bug destroys monsters upon being flipped face up, Armed or Blue Ninja destroyed spell cards, and then Reaper of the Cards or Card Hunting Death card for traps. Ironic since this was the spell destroyer in the anime and manga. Yeah, Man-Eater Bug was the best of these since it could destroy any monster, so it was a good way to get over 2k defenders or a pain-in-the-ass monster they had out on the field. Armed Ninja and the Death Guard were more situational and could be more information gathering, since if there was a card set, you would have to look at it to see what it was, and if it was that card type, you could destroy it, otherwise it was just set face down in the field. Also, why is Reaper a tribute? I mean, I know, he was a 5-star monster in the manga, so that made sense, but you'd think that monster being the one that there's more of, and there's likely to be more you'd want to get rid of, that would be the tribute one. But no, it's the trap card one. Yeah, trap cards. I bet you've kind of forgotten about them since there's very few we've actually talked about in this series. Which makes this one completely useless. And it's going to be even more useless when another trap removal flip monster comes out later down the line. Anyway, speaking of Panic and his weird monsters, here's another one. Barox, another monster that Konami thought would be too strong as just a normal tribute, so you had to fuse it with a Frenzied Panda and a Gargoyle from a machine that if you don't live next to, I mean, you could just normal summon it, and if you weren't playing competitively, you were not playing this in any tournament unless you were super rich. And also, just that stat line. 1380 attack, 1530 defense. Was the designer Takahashi thinking, well, Panic's kind of a creepy psychopath, so we should have cards that match that insanity? About the only thing that probably sets this card apart from all of the old fusions is the time it took to actually get this card and more or less its reprint history. It came out to the TCG in Astro Pack 2 before getting a reprint in Battle of Legend Terminal Revenge of all things. Yeah, I was really wanting an ultra rare Barox who finished my Panic deck. Jesus. The best way to describe Sleeping Lion is it is the defender that from the set you didn't want from the common slot. It had the same rarity as as Giant Soldier. Both are meant to be defenders, but this one's only 1700. If it wasn't for the fact this set had a common defender that was just superior to it in every way, it still would not be good since Spirit of the Harp was a common for Volume 2. So it is mostly for the fact that this card is there if you haven't pulled at least one copy of a common card from 2 50-card sets. It's purple. Look, I'm sorry OCG and TCG text, that is not a black tuxedo, that is purple. Are they colorblind or something? Obviously it can blend in with the purple shadows behind him, but that's about it. But, you know, Woody Phantom or the much cooler Jin Death Satan was actually pretty decent. 1400 attack, so was just slightly weaker than the big normal summons of the game at this point. So aside from lying about, well, what color is, it's good. Trust me, there's going to be a lot more of those, like, decent attackers that might not be the strongest monsters, but they're still good. Okay, before we get to Frenzied Panda, let me make something abundantly clear. Don't fuck with pandas. Yes, they're cuddly, huggable, and because they're an endangered species, everyone thinks that they're something that needs to be taken care of, but that's just because their environment is just getting worse and worse as time has gone on. It's still a bear, and it will kill you if you get too close. Because, like, you know, the name Killer or Frenzied Panda makes you think, like, oh, this is just one of the untamed, unkind pandas. Just look at them from far away rather than being close. So if I was going to pick between getting beaten to death with a large, thick piece of bamboo or their claws, yeah, I think I would rather go with claws, because I'll hopefully bleed out faster than more or less getting pummeled in with a giant piece of bamboo. Okay, look, I know I said that there was a lot more better monsters in this set, but we do have some filler to get through with Skull Stalker, another Joey Wheeler special from his No Speller Trap deck. From a time where having a No Speller Trap deck was kind of a bad idea, that grips you with his claws before stinging you with its poisonous stinger. So is it like a chimera between a scorpion and a crab? Because it has both a claw and a stinger, but it's also humanoid. What is this? And it's more interesting in the art than its measly 900 stat points, though. I guess it was also a decent fusion monster, well, a decent fusion fodder in the old games, so there's that. I guess speaking of the old games, here's one that clearly was made with the old rules of how fusion worked, i.e. you just slap two monsters together and you got a monster out of them. Rare fish! It is so rare because you are not seeing it. Aside from the fact that it's just a 300 point boost off of Enchanting Mermaid, it is our first fusion monster that requires another fusion monster. Yeah, you needed not one, but two polymerizations just to get this thing out onto the field. And again, it was only 300 more points stronger than the Enchanting Mermaid. Again, this card makes more sense if you're using the old Game Boy Color games where fusion is far more simple. You just slap two monsters together, no polymerization, but polymerization this card just sucks. Also with the fact that Gaia the Dragon Champ is just the better monster if you were really wanting to fuse. So there are some interesting things about Fire Yara or Flame Devil aside from yet another decent Volume 3 monster. So one way Yara can be translated or be said in English is boy. The other way is bastard. Yeah, I don't know if it was just the localizer who didn't fully do their research or just they would think kids would be too dumb to look up what Yaro means because back then you really didn't know that there was anything beyond your small little part of the world. But this monster could be translated as Fire Bastard. I mean, maybe it's a kid that was born out of a fair, that's why it's called a bastard. But it's also worth noting that this card had a rather noteworthy common printing error where it was labeled as a dark monster rather than a fire monster. I say common because this misprint can only cost about $20 for you to buy. You know, I would think Metal Dragon would have been the name of some, like, indie metal band or grunge band. Like, maybe a few songs out there called Metal Dragon, but nothing. No Musical.ly pages, no wikis about indie bands. You wonder why I'm bringing it up instead of talking about Metal Dragon. I mean, it's another fusion monster that just lists the names of the monsters you need to make it. Maybe just, like, this mechanically converted dragon breathes fire or spews metal out at their opponents. It's existing. It's there. It's not, we're gonna get more interesting fusions far later, and it's gonna be a lot easier when I just need to explain the card's uniqueness. But yeah, the art does look cool, and it really is interesting, but that you can say that for a lot of these cards that look cool, but are just more for looking at. Up next is our first Sea Serpent. Or not, because the, we have some cards later on that claim they're the first Sea Serpent, but this is technically the first one because this came out first. They define Sea Serpents in this game as just dragons for water, but they didn't want to count it as dragons, and we would be getting another dragon-adjacent thing later, but that's, again, way later. The Spike Seadra first pierces you with its spikes that are just jutting out of its body. Is it just part of him, or are they, like, quills stuck to him? Also, do those tusks on its mouth count as spikes or no? And then it proceeds to electrocute you. Or flood electricity into your body, which is kind of weird since energy does not have mass like normal things. If it was like water pouring into you from the spikes, it might make sense, but the card states flooding with electricity. So does your bloodstream just become pure electricity? Who cares? Continuing our electricity theme, we have Tripwire or Landmine Beast. Rather than blowing up, it basically creates an magnetic field around you for its attack. It's an all-round okay monster. 1200 attack, 1300 defense to lay on the field. Kinda weird that it doesn't have like an effect that leaves a trap on the field that destroys monsters when killed. But again, not a game, so they can't like program it to like, hey, put in one zone a trap hole. Next up is the TCG's original best normal summon from the Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. Skull Redbird or Sky Hunter finds itself in a reverse position. In the TCG, it was 50 points stronger than the second best monster. Here is the second best monster 50 points weaker than the best monster Rogue Doll. Though considering Rogue Doll is a rare while this is a common, you're likely going to pull this before getting a Rogue Doll or no Rogue Doll at all, and it'll let you rain knives down onto your opponent that is hidden in their wings. Not like they swoop down to attack with their beak or those talons. Not for a bird, but sure, that sounds threatening, I guess. So we had Spider-Man in an earlier set, but now we have an alternate verse character who, when an innocent spider was bitten by a crab-making Ganiguma, or crab spider, kind of continuing the trend of chimeras that are weak. It combines the sticky webs of a spider with the sharp pincers of crab for a probably the weakest monster of the set. Since it doesn't have an effect like other monsters, it's just kind of there. Anyway, continuing the trends of me just giving trivia information when I'm talking about these fusion monsters. Flower Wolf. Instead of just being, hey, another fusion monster, too much effort to get this monster because fusion just sucks at this point, let's see some interesting trivia. This was for 22 years the strongest beast monster fusion in the game. It was only dethroned as recently as 2021 with Dawn of Majesty's Magic Key Beast. I'm gonna butcher this name so badly. Anchalabolus. It only beats it by 400 attack points, but still, it's quite impressive that this vanilla monster that probably most people forgot exists held that record for so long. There's a lot less to say about the Stone Snake. It does the Tremors thing of appearing from below to attack people with tentacles. Yeah, not eat with its large mouth and teeth because, because... Eldine houses powerful spells inside this cane they hold, and despite that, it is not a mage on par with the Dark Magician, seeing as how it is not able to use any of those spells that they have in their arsenal. More likely they have them backfire rather than doing any damage. Okay, this is one of those monsters I disagree on the stat line with. I don't think Kamakiri Man would be a more defensive monster, unless it cares more for waiting to use its guillotine to kill its opponents. 1400 would be more beneficial to it than 1400 defense, considering that the only cards you would want to put into defense position would either be those 2k monsters or flip effects. Though, then again, 1400 defense is pretty decent considering that most of the monsters at this point that could beat over it are free monsters, so hey, maybe that 1400 defense at this point wasn't actually that bad. And here's the other pair of flip monsters from this set. So first up is Skelangel. I guess the angelic form of the Fog King, since the censored art gives it the crown of the Fog Kings rather than a halo. Though I do think the OCG name fits a bit better, being the transparent angel, and yes, there are other angels in this game, so I don't get why they went for this weird name, since its whole body is invisible. Anyway, this card basically replaces itself upon being flipped since you draw a card. And yes, it's going to get replaced because this thing is always going to end up dying with that weak stat line. This, and a certain iconic spell card from this set, was the first example of drawing outside of your draw phase. Obviously, the other card would be much better because it was also a +1, but this would be nice in an event that you kind of needed to get more cards into your hands. Meanwhile, Hane Hane is interesting. You could argue that Maneater Bug was probably not as good, because of Monster Reborn being in the game, so even if a card was destroyed, there was a chance of summoning it back. Hane Hane could place a tribute monster back in the hand, meaning it's wasted its time, but there are just some cards that you can easily summon out, and so it makes it more just like you're stemming the bleeding for a moment. Regardless, it was probably worth just playing both. Maybe Hane Hane in the side deck if you knew your opponent had tribute monsters worth sending back to the hand to set them back on tempo. But yeah, as the first set of effect monsters, these were pretty solid. They're simple, but they have really good utility effects to play in your deck alongside your big beaters. They're probably more important and interesting than Misairuzume, the missile shark called Nile with a missile attached to its belly that fires at opponents. Again, why do we need to make sharks more dangerous? People realize that sharks are terrifying with all those teeth and the ability to just drag you around and screw you up. When I attach that to something less threatening like a turtle or clownfish. Skull Servant's stronger and less memorable cousin. The Wandering Doom, or Dead, wanders the edge of the Neverworld. And that's kind of all the text says about it. Nothing about what it can do against others. Like maybe it uses those cold, bony hands to strangle people since it's a big focus of the art. No mention of being stronger in numbers. It probably just wants to be left alone, and I kind of would want to as well. I kind of wanted to make a joke about how Rock Ogre Grotto #1 evolved into Steel Ogre Grotto, but after looking into it, Rock Ogre Grotto #1 was the next vol, even not beforehand, so I guess it would be more of a Gen 2 joke of adding younger forms for pre-existing Pokemon. And again, it's another example of the localizers just making something and naming them 1 and 2. Since in the OCG, it's just known as the Giant Idol of Steel, worship in the Land of Machines. Because in the Land of Machines, there is no mystical elf, giant soldier of stone, Aquamador, or Spirit of the Harp. So this is just another mediocre tribute defender. Wouldn't a lesser dragon just be a lizard because they don't breathe fire? In some fantasy settings, there are different kinds of breaths that dragons can use, like ice, acid, and electricity, so maybe he hasn't tried any of those yet. Guess he may not have thought of it, though, since lizard brain. But hey, it's actually kind of okay in this early point where card power is not at its highest yet. Also, that posing, I like the artwork, the way it's like it has its back to you, those sharp claws, but, yeah, I might want to be careful when looking at the art to put into this so I don't end up with some NSFW work. Before we actually got to the cute little puffball that you would expect 1 XP of every anime, in the same way every Pokemon game needs its new Pikachu clone, the Wicked Ghost in the Attic. Or just Ghost in the Attic. Just added Wicked to it. This harmless monster just lurks in the attic, likely helping us to play your Pac-Man machine you have stored up in the attic for years based on those eyes, because it's just more filler. For those wondering, no, Dark World Thorns is not the first Dark World monster that they would retroactively add to the archetype because it was named Dark World. Because it's Dark World, not Dark World. Also in the OCG, it's just known as Demon World's Thorn. Imagine what would happen if the Man-Eating Plant got some of that good demon fertilizer in its system, making it a blue plant that doesn't need meat, instead letting its prickly form just stab people to death by wrapping around them. Yet another classic hit from the early Joseph deck, or Joseph deck of playing cool monsters, Ampharosaurus, or Dinosaur Man, is apparently very smart despite being very weak. Which also I think is one of the very few digs at players ever in the TCG, claiming that most people are stupid, though considering the reading comprehension of some Yugi tubers that might be a little too true. Okay, can we get some consistencies about what we can include in cards? Because sometimes we can mention blood sucking in card text, but for some reason it isn't okay to call this that which drinks lifeblood. I thought it was just being rather over serious since duh, people need blood to live. If you don't have blood, you're just a skeleton with skin over it. But lifeblood is a word that is used as something necessary for life, like being the lifeblood of a station. So does drooling lizard target specifically people considered the lifeblood of a location? Or is it just to get anyone who passes by that's weak enough to die to it since it's not particularly strong? Nah. Hey look! More chains that are monsters, but rather than holy chains, we just have sealing chains, capable of robbing their opponents of their power. Which kind of begs the question why this card is not an effect monster that, takes away 500 attack points. Right, we now have effect monsters, so they could have done this, and they will have effect monsters to take away attack points later, so why not have started now? The Armored Starfish, whose armor I am guessing is pro level considering the measly 1400 defense. Yes, I know I brought up 1400 actually being okay, but commons in this set could get to 2000, so I don't really think that's great. I mean, maybe more or less this could just be a small defender you use to work up to the Curse of Dragons or any of the 2 tributes you have in mind, but probably better just for the Giant Soldier of Sora Aquamador since it could also be used for attacking. I guess if you were talking about tributes, there was also a Succubus Knight, a mage knight capable of sending out bone-chilling spells or proceeds to cause bloodbaths, seeing as how it's a counterpart to the Vishwar Randy from the previous sets. But so unless you're a Gunner-class duelist, you're probably better off with the Assassin or this Abomination since they were also in this set. But with that, we have reached the ends of the monsters in this set, and we move on to the spells. And no traps, because, again, there's really no traps. We'll get to more traps next video, but let's get to the spells. So, we have more stat equips in this set. Link's Silver Bow and Arrow for fairies. Dragon Treasure for, well, dragons. Electro Whip for thunder monsters, which doesn't make sense since lightning is electricity, thunder is just noise. Mystical Magical Moon for beast warriors, and no, you can't destroy the moon like Yugi did. You have to wait for a specific spell to play out that fantasy. And finally, Follow Wind for winged beast monsters. The real fun in this set comes from the new spell cards in this set. First up is Soft Defense. A basic card, it's a counter to all the wall monsters in the game since they changed them to attack position for the turn. It easily gets over Harp and Elf, though you may need stronger monsters for both Soldier and Mador. But the next card... Okay, this one might take a little bit of explanation. So, this is Pot of Greed. So are you ready? You draw 2 cards. 1, 2. That's 2 cards you draw. Now, I know that was a lot to take in. 2 cards is a lot of information. So just remember that you draw 2. Okay. God, they have to explain this every time in the anime like we're all children. And so I was just doing it that way. But, yeah, I don't think I need to explain Pot of Greed to too many people. It's one of the most iconic cards from this game that anyone remembers. It didn't matter how much you were into the game, that green pot with that shit-eating grin was so certifiably Yu-Gi-Oh! You didn't even need to be told that. It was one of the earliest and most iconic power spells that was the first to hit the ban list when it was created. I.e. more or less when they started to ban cards rather than just limiting and semi-limiting them. But is it still good? Couldn't it come off the list? No. Again, +1. You get 1 card off of this and it replaces itself. Literally every deck would just put this in here for better consistency to reach potential cards. Kind of makes it feel anticlimactic that we're ending on Gravedigger's School last. I mean, it is last card of the set, but yeah. This is an anti-monster reborn. It banishes 2 monsters out of the graveyard at a time when there really was no monsters to get back. Nowadays, this card kind of sucks because you can do that. You can get monsters back. But we do have a little more to go here because we do have some stuff in between Volume Free and Booster Free. First up is the first set of limited editions that were released on June 1st, 1999. These packs were only available to people subscribed to Shonen Magazine, printing a few secret cards from the first Duel Monsters game before becoming cards available in McDonald's in the States when the game finally came to the States. They were divided between Yugi, Jonochi, and Kaiba. First, let's describe Yugi's monsters, starting with the Millennium Shield. A shield passed down for the Egyptian royal family capable of blocking even the mightiest blow. Unless it's, lightning, a black hole, a Fisher, or a Blue Eyes White Dragon that's powered up with Dragon Treasure. 3000's kind of overkill. The only thing that would be routinely beating over this was a Blue Eyes. So it kind of just felt like you were sitting on something that just showed you got this set. So, hey, if you're one of those high rollers, it's the perfect card for you. Warrior? Really? What a beast warrior or beast, unless it's a weird small sword hiding deep inside this teddy bear. Or maybe it's a beast because it eats with that mouth rather than, killing. But I guess it's a fine stuffed animal at 1200 attack. Very rare few things in the game that will beat it. Then the same kind of goes for Flying Penguin. An Emperor Penguin that takes to the air, which you would think would be more defense oriented since it's flying away to evade monsters, so they kind of beat themselves up. But, Yugi's pack is okay. 2 12k attack monsters and a kind of overkill 3k defender. Shame that Kaiba's pack is just so much better because it comes with Takriminos, which claimed it was the first sea serpent in the trivia section on Yugipedia, but I feel like that's kind of wrong. Sea serpent that freely travels around the ocean that joins a long list of monsters available in hard-to-get product that is becoming less egregious since we do get good stuff. You got it, it was basically just a 4th copy of Arabi, but wasn't powered up by raised body heat. really, he had the best pack if you look at all 3 cards. He even got Unizombie. No, wait, no, this, not the tuner monster. Tuners don't exist yet. Just his old vanilla self. Help a weird, wonky pair of skinny and fat, I guess, flattened you, since the big thing is that they struggle to walk. It's weird, but don't worry, we'll be seeing this ghoul again. And the last of his offerings is Yoronzo, or if you translate this word, it becomes I won't give it to you, since Yoronzo is an informal way of saying it. Even though this card is more associated with Duke Devlin, which, thinking about it, how did that get through in terms of naming? Yes, I get it. Duke Devlin, like, he's a lucky guy, or like luck is a big thing because he uses dice. Like, you know how many cards that had the word devil in it get taken out? Like, oh, no, it's not devil, it's Devlin. Like, it's close enough. I feel like also, Yoronzo sort of became more associated with Duke Devlin because of Dungeon Dice Monster, the anime, not the original manga, because he used different Dungeon Dice Monsters in that, but we're kind of getting off track here. Anyway, yeah, Yoronzo is fine. It's a defender, sort of attacker. It's a decent mix. It's a lot better than Joey's 2 tributes. First up, the Megasonic Eye, a murderous machine from the edge of the universe made of a mysterious metal. Not mysterious enough to get killed by a cursed dragon or blue eyes. Yamadron, or Yamadrone, depending on where you play the game, who is a lesser Hydra, turning the area around it into a puddle of fire. It claims to be that, but it's not particularly that strong. And probably the only value in this set, Fairy Gift, which I bet is a gift from Taya because of how awful his pack is. So it is yet another in the line of monsters that focus on happiness rather than killing. And side note, this is technically a TCG art because I feel like I would get in trouble for showing the OCG art. I'm just being careful. Just a little more. First, we have even more gifts from Shonen Jump in the form of the V-Jump August 1999 special show present set A and B from June 21st, 1999. These were his secret rare reprints of already difficult cards to get at the time. A came with Ken and the Swords Mistress, Trial of Nightmare, and the 13th Grave, while B was Turtle Tigers, Celtic Guardian, and Dark King of the Abyss. Nothing outstanding, just rarity upgrades to add to your deck if you already had it. And then there was July 1st, 1999, which had Duel Monsters 2 Dark Duel Stories. No, not that Dark Duel Stories, this Dark Duel Stories. Yeah, they took the name of the second game to replace Try Holy God Advent when we got that game to TCG, and this was like the first Yu-Gi-Oh game to come out stateside for the Game Boy. They could have just called it Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, I don't think anyone would care. Anyway, the invitation for the tournament that would be held at the end of August gave people 3 of the 5 card invitation cards for Duelist Kingdom. The Actual Kingdom, Setting Sail for the Kingdom, and Glory of the King's Hand. Kind of weird, since the second game really wasn't about Duelist Kingdom. It seemed like it was more about the weird tournament that took place before the anime, but whatever. That puts us at July 5th, 1999, for Booster Free. And we'll actually get some traps to talk about next time.